I was drugged up, completely immobilised and raped.
At the end of the day, you can't stop kids from having sex, but you can stop rapes from occurring.
Danny and Lily are both 17. They believe what happened to them is all too common.
I was on a public train when I was assaulted.
Were there others on the train?
Yes, and no one said anything.
How did you react when it happened?
I was so scared. I didn't think there was anything else I could do but freeze and wait it out.
And was this a boy you previously trusted?
Yes.
Danny broke down at school a few weeks later and told a teacher, who called the police.
They interrogated me on essentially what exactly had happened to me and what I went through and what I said and what I did, and they asked me what I was wearing. And then...
Why was that relevant?
A lot of guys don't realise that what you're wearing doesn't mean or initiate consent. It was terrifying to me that the very people who exist and are paid to protect you could ask you something like that and challenge the most traumatising thing that have ever happened to you and suggest that as a kid, it's your fault that this happened to you.
It's classic victim blaming.
Yeah.
The police decided not to lay charges. Danny says she often wonders what was more traumatic, what happened, or how badly the system failed her.
What we see in Australia is that rape culture is so intrinsic to our understandings of power, we accept it as normal. So what we see is that from a young age, boys are never taught that they shouldn't keep hitting on that girl. They're never taught about what consent looks like, and those conversations just aren't happening, especially because often when girls do speak out, they're slut-shamed.
Danny is now in Year 12. Recently, she led a student rally at the Sydney Town Hall, calling for justice for sexual abuse victims.
I can't deal with the idea of more children my age going through what I went through.
All of us are so deeply hurt, not only by what happened to us and how we were failed, but the fact that it's still happening, and it's happening in the places that are writing the laws.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
Ridiculous that we still have to march for this.
We won't stop marching until we have justice.
I'd safely say it's close to all of my friends that this has happened to.
So this has almost become normalised amongst young women.
I think that's the problem, is that it's normal. This is just how life is. Lenny, come on.
Lily Maud Horton is now in Year 12 too.
So how would you describe this Lily that I'm sitting opposite now?
She is incredibly unstable, broken, terrified of men. In any situation where a male that isn't my brother is near me, I'm scanning, assessing, looking for danger.
3 years ago, Lily went to a party with her friends, but that night she says she was raped by a man in his 20s.
He walked in, stopped at me and said, "Wow, you are gorgeous." And I was flattered. You know, I'm a young teenager, I'm insecure, and I didn't realise that a monster could look so kind. It was frightening to not have control over your own body, to have someone on top of you with the most intense eyes you've ever seen and such power. Being paralysed in that way is something I wouldn't wish on anyone.
How did your body react?
We're taught there's fight and flight, but for the most part, our body lets us know that if we move, we could be hurt further, and it makes that choice that to freeze and just mentally leave and wait till it's over is the safest option.
A few days later, Lily went to the police.
I'm very lucky that the police officer I ended up with was female, empathetic, and had a heart of gold. But the rest of it is awful. After my case, she quit. She could not handle having this job anymore. It's because so many victims go through the court system and so evidently are victims, and then they just brush them off and say, oh, not guilty.
I know you feel horribly let down. You know it wasn't your fault now, don't you?
I had my family and counsellors telling me that it wasn't my fault, but I wish I wasn't a statistic. I wish I wasn't a part of some huge number that the government doesn't care about. And ScoMo's comment about being able to protest safely, that is not an expression of opinion. That is pleading for the basic human right. And for him to go, oh, well, at least you weren't getting shot at. I don't get it. Because so many women are murdered as a result of this. And in a way, I was. I'm still living, but I'm not the same girl I was. Part of me did die inside. And I'm never going to be the same.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Sorry.
I just don't think our government understands that we will never forget their response to this. We will never forget.
Lily and her mum, Karen, are two of around 40,000 people who've signed a petition drawn up by former Sydney schoolgirl Chanel Contos, which calls for more education on consent.
What needs to happen is that consent is taught far earlier and actually taught. Not just contraception. I understand that that's important. But what's far more important is that people don't have these experiences. Because the amount of boys that probably have assaulted someone and don't realise that what they've done is assault is the largest part of the issue.
Things have changed quickly in recent weeks. Consent education is soon going to become mandatory in Victorian schools, and New South Wales Police has announced a shift in the way sexual assaults can be reported so that it's easier for people to provide evidence about their perpetrator. But there are other issues.
We know that young boys in particular have access to extreme porn from an early age these days. How much do you think that contributes to boys' expectations when they're around girls?
Oh, so much. The fact that they're viewing these things and they think that that's what sex is disgusting. The problem is that when you're not speaking about sexual consent, how to treat women, what harassing behaviour looks like, and then show them these intense videos, you're setting them up to be like that.
Lily says social media and the pressure on young girls to send provocative photos of themselves doesn't help either.
You can't blame these girls for participating in that activity when we're brought up in a world that is a catfight of beauty standards and unrealistic expectations. At such a young age, when you're so vulnerable, you're going to do that. And when they push and push and push, you're going to do that. It's not the fault of these young, vulnerable girls. It's the fault of conditioning these boys so incorrectly.
In many ways, Danny and Lily's experiences have robbed them of their childhoods. They're both mature beyond their years, but were forced to be that way.
It's so terrifying to think that just like you, other girls my age have been raped and assaulted, and just like you, the people meant to protect us failed us, and it just keeps happening.
How do you see your future?
I want to be a psychologist, and I want to help people that have experienced what I've experienced, and make sure that when I adopt kids that they never have to go through what I have.
Why do you specifically say adopt kids?
I don't think that I'll ever be in a relationship with anyone to have kids naturally.
So you've made that decision at the age of 17?
Yeah, and I want to give kids that need a home and be a mother because I have that natural instinct, but I'm too terrified to ever have a relationship with anyone.
Wow. How articulate were those two girls? When you say that they'd matured beyond their years, I mean, it's so obvious in that piece, you know, you feel like you're talking to grown adults.
They shouldn't be as wise as they are,
very wise, yeah.
but having been through the experiences they've been through, they can see where the flaws are in the system. They can see that all of the young men that they may want to date are all being schooled in violent porn on the internet. Parents don't realise that young boys are seeing it, some of them at the age of 8. And so if that's what you see, that a relationship with a woman, with a girl looks like, of course you're going to play that out.
I'm really glad you raised that, by the way, because I feel like we've had our head in the sands on the pornography stuff for so long.
Yeah,
It's all part
really
of...
got to get that sorted.
Exactly.
And parents.
Yeah, and it's part of that teaching of consent, you know?
Yeah. Well, if this story has raised any issues for you, National 24-hour counselling helpline and support can be found at 1800-RESPECT on 1800-737-732, and crisis support is available 24/7 through Lifeline on 13 11 14.